Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around and we'll leave you with a movie to watch over the weekend with your family or that special someone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in the same night. And for tonight's episode, I've got an interesting proposition, an interesting, I suppose, core theme for tonight's episode. Don't worry, I'm not going to repeat what I did last week and do 6 movies all in the same night like I did last week with Sharknado. I'm not going to go that crazy. Tonight's going to be interesting, though, because it's actually themed around something that's happening here at the station, here at 88.1 The Burg specifically. This week, 88.1 The Burg is going to be releasing their second issue of their staff and DJ created zine. Their little magazine filled with a bunch of fun little pages created by the staff and other DJs here at 88.1 The Burg. I do have a page in that zine, by the way, just wanted to mention it. It's completely free. You can stop by and pick it up in the office throughout the rest of the week. Anyways, this little magazine is themed around one specific series of books and movies, and that is the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series of books, and kind of consequently, the series of movies based on those books. You could probably see where I'm going with this. I decided it'd be kind of funny, and I was encouraged by some of the staff here at the station to go with the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies for today's episode of What to Watch Wednesdays. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. For tonight's watch list, we have Diary of a Wimpy Kid from 2010, Diary of a Wimpy Kid Rodrick Rules from 2011, and Diary of a Wimpy Kid Dog Days from 2012. I should mention that the 88.1 The Burg zine second issue is not the only reason I'm talking about these movies. I'm also talking about them because as a kid, I was a big fan of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. I only saw the first movie as a child, and it was just a fun excuse to watch the other 2 movies, and I just needed something easy to do. So seemed like something easy to do. We're going to go to break. And when we come back, we'll jump into the first Diary of a Wimpy Kid movie. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Diary of a Wimpy Kid from 2010, available to watch now on Disney+. For the basic plot summary of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, we follow Greg Heffley, the main character, who has just started middle school. His goal? Quite simple, to become popular, because this is middle school, and he thinks that popularity is important. To be back in middle school, where all the wrong things were super important to everybody. That includes me. I think all the unimportant stuff like popularity and how many friends you had and how involved you really were just kind of way too important. Not that they aren't important to some degree, not the popularity thing. But I say like involvement in how many friends you have. That can sometimes be important. But you're also in that awkward transitioning phase where you're going from being a preteen to halfway on your way to becoming an actual teenager. And so you kind of just get really dramatic about everything. I think I've kind of lost the point. No, I haven't. Because that right there kind of encapsulates everything about this movie, this franchise, the series of books especially. I mean, keep in mind, I started reading the first Diary of a Wimpy Kid book back when I was in grade school. I loved this series of books. Weirdly enough, I kept reading them even after I got out of middle school, which is not something I'm really all that embarrassed to admit, because they were very fun. They were kind of a mix of those sort of children's books with the kind of comic book aesthetic to them, and they also weren't like brainless reads. You could still read words and you still got some form of mental engagement out of them, and they were kind of silly, but they had some form of message in them. Kinda, if you were looking closely enough, maybe not. They were kind of like reading Garfield comic strips, if I'm being fully honest with you, but that's not really all that important. Let's talk about the movie. This isn't What to Watch Read Wednesdays. This is What to Watch Wednesdays. Wait, I just realized I said What to Watch Read Wednesday. No, okay. This is not what to read Wednesdays. This is what to watch Wednesdays. Let's talk about the movie. First of all, the reason I kind of got off track with it is because, if I'm being honest, everything I just talked about encapsulates more of the plot, quote unquote, of the movie. Because there's not like a central through line for this movie. You could argue that there is. I would argue it's kind of a flimsy one, and that's between Greg and his best friend Rowley. But that doesn't really come up until later. It feels a bit misguided and kind of floaty over the place for the first bit of it. I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm saying that that's just kind of... It's a series of vignettes more than it is a deep and intricate connected sort of drama movie. Because it's a kid's movie from 2010. They didn't really spend a lot of effort really converting it into some high stakes drama movie. So if you're expecting more out of it, if you're expecting it to be some high stakes drama, keep in mind, kids movie from 2010 with like high saturation, like a lot of saturation, some very cheap and not very good looking CGI, and a lot of pop songs that are just dropped into the movie at random. It feels so very 2010 that it kind of hurts sometimes, especially since I was a kid back during that time. I was a 2000s kid and I grew up with these books, so it's just kind of, it's so nostalgic it's painful sometimes. That's really what it is. It's so nostalgic it can be a bit painful. You know what else is painful? The main character. That's not a good sign, but let me explain. In the defense of Greg Heffley being a bit of an arrogant, antisocial, and, oh, how do I put it? Conceited. There's so many other words. How do I say it? How do I say it nicely? Proud. Kind of full of himself. Brat. Yeah, that kind of encapsulates it. Despite him being kind of an arrogant brat, in his defense, for the sake of the movie, he was like that in the books, and he is also in middle school. Let's be honest here. We all thought we were better than we actually were in middle school. We thought we were all that when we weren't. So he has that going for him at the very least. And I will admit that Zachary Gordon, the guy who plays Greg, is good at being annoying. He's not exactly a perfect actor, but he fits the role quite nicely, both in terms of being an annoying middle schooler, but also fitting the character of Greg Heffley as a whole, I'd say. And I'd say that for pretty much every other casting choice they made over all three of these movies. That doesn't just go for the first one. Keep in mind, I'll bring this up later, but weirdly enough, it's kind of fun to watch every single character from the books, almost every single character that had any form of relevancy to Greg's story, be represented in live action to some capacity. It's this weird sort of contrast of, I didn't expect them to go live action. You could argue that they didn't need to go live action. You could question why they went live action. But then when you sit down and look at it, you go, I kind of wish that a lot of more movies did this. I kind of wish we got this more often than we actually did in the 2000s, because they kind of went overboard with it. But I wish we got more right interpretations in this regard, I'd say. What I'm trying to get at is that, weirdly enough, seeing the 2D drawn, kind of hand-drawn middle school cartoon characters represented as real people should not translate as well as it does in this movie. I'm being genuinely serious. I was expecting it not to translate as well, but it translates pretty well. I will also say that this is all from a severe amount of nostalgia blindness. I will be the first one to admit that I have severe nostalgia blindness because, again, I read the first book when I was in grade school. I have been very familiar with this series for a very long time. And when I say the series, I mean the books, and by extension, the movies. I've also watched many a YouTube video talking about these movies. I've seen reviews of them. I've seen reactions to them. They're all over the place, and people have mentioned them all the time. They're kind of the core, I'd say, early 2000s kids group, yes. the early 2000s core memory for a lot of people my age. And because of that, I wouldn't say that this movie would hold up if you weren't a 2000s kid. That's the big caveat that I will apply to all three of these, but especially the first one, weirdly enough. I'd say if you weren't a 2000s kid, were not at least vaguely familiar with the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, and had no nostalgia even remotely for them, you may not enjoy these movies at all. You may not get as much as I got out of them. But because I have such nostalgic attachment to them, I got more out of them than I was expecting to, and that's kind of amazing. So it gets props from that perspective at the very least. I will also admit one final thing. Zooey Mama. That means nothing to a lot of you, but that means everything to me. With that being said, we're going to go to break, and when we come back, we'll jump into the second movie tonight, which will be Rodrick Rules. So stick around. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Rodrick Rules from 2011, available to watch now on Disney+. I should mention that this movie is actually called Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Rodrick Rules, but I didn't want to read out that entire name, so I'm not going to for every single time. Now then, the basic plot of Rodrick Rules is that of following Greg from the first movie as he begins a new year of middle school and must contend with his greatest enemy, that being his older brother Rodrick, who is the same Rodrick in the title of the movie, Rodrick Rules. It's meant to be a sort of, how do I put it, kind of a punk sort of way of him going, yeah, Rodrick rules, Greg drools, that literal exact thing. Almost exactly that type of attitude to it. Because it was 2011, and the world was just a different place back in 2011, let's be honest here. It was a lot more cheesy, and I should know because I grew up during that time. Anyways, so you know how I just mentioned what the plot is and then described it as, oh, it's Greg fighting with his brother, and that's the quote-unquote plot of the movie? That's because that's really the best way I can summarize it, because if I tried to kind of break down the more individual elements, it wouldn't get complicated. It's more like, it's a lot like the first movie in the sense that it's built up of a lot of vignettes almost, and breaking those down individually would take too long. It's kind of like trying to describe 3 episodes of an anthology TV show as a plot summary for an overall show, right? And that's weird considering that it's Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I gotta be honest here, it's not like they're all that complicated, but there's not like there's just one core central through line throughout the entire thing. There are like 2 of them that work as a central through line individually, but there's only a little bit of overlap, and that's like maybe once or twice. So here, I'll just kind of lay it out. We have Rodrick and Greg not getting along, which leads to them staying home from vacation, and the mother and father and younger brother leave them at the house to figure out their differences while they go on vacation. And so then Rodrick throws a party, and then they have to clean up the house and hide the evidence that they had a party. And at the same time, Rodrick wants to take his crazy rock band to the local talent show. And so there's that going on. And then maybe they intersect later, but that's technically a spoiler because it's later in the movie, even though I'm sure most of you listening don't really care about spoilers for the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies. I'm going to hold up my principle of not spoiling movies. So there's that. Do you understand now why I can't exactly summarize the full plot? When I just tried to, it's like me kind of just doing one run-on sentence. And I'm good at those. So when it just sounds like one and has the qualities of one and an uninteresting one at that, that's saying something. That's really saying something. So let's say something else and move on to a strength of this movie. Despite how I just described it as a run-on sentence, I will admit that those 2 through lines are a lot better as story components than the first movie had. The first movie was a lot more focused on Greg trying to be popular, which is very unfocused. Let's be honest. What does that even mean? That could mean any number of things for a middle schooler because they're dramatic and they're turning into a teenager. That could mean literally anything. Whereas with this movie, it's focused around the relationship between Greg and Rodrick, the two brothers. You've got one in middle school, one who's about high school age. So you have this conflicting interest between them because they're family, but they don't get along. Which that's exactly the kind of thing that makes for a more interesting story than I'm in high school and I want to be popular. Or no, I'm in middle school, high school, it applies to both. I'm a prepubescent to a preteen to a teenager and I want to be popular. How does that provide an interesting plot for a movie? Versus my brother and I don't get along. And our goal is to possibly get along because maybe we get paid or maybe we just stay out of trouble. That's a more achievable goal in my eyes and in a lot of eyes. That's a more interesting story. You have more of a plot there that you can actually mine. And because of that, I'd say that Rodrick Rules is honestly a bit better than the first movie. Part of that comes from the fact that I think the second book in the series, which this movie is based off of, Rodrick Rules, was a bit better than the first movie altogether as well. And when I meant to say the first book, I think the first book was really good at launching the series. But I think Rodrick Rules was just kind of that really good mix of a lot of different elements and kind of had the conflict between Greg and his brother and peeling back the curtain on a lot of other things not related directly to Greg and his quest for popularity, that it felt like a good evolution of the book series. And because of that, by extension, the movies feel like that pretty heavily. I will admit, most of the reason the movies feel that way is because it gives more screen time to one of the lead actors. Another lead actor shout out. Let's be honest here. A lot of people listening right now, or people who listen to this, who are my age and have heard of these movies even remotely, are well aware that the internet loves the actor who played Rodrick. His name is Devin Bostick, and people have said that he steals the show. Because, you know, it's called Rodrick Rules. You kind of would hope that the actor playing Rodrick in Rodrick Rules would steal the show to some degree. He does. He absolutely does. I can't deny any people who say that he steals the show. I mean, it's sure is my opinion, but he does steal the show. It's my opinion that he absolutely steals the show. Because he's funny, he's kind of emo, he's definitely a punk. And he's kind of not the brightest as a teenager. He's a very lazy, lethargic, and not very competent teenager. Which, A, is very true to the character, and B, is really funny to watch in a 2011 comedy movie. It's kind of just that perfect mix of a lot of different elements, but it's helped along extensively by just the sheer cadence of the actor's performance. I gotta be honest with you. He is really funny. He's just really funny. And it's really funny to watch him because of that. Speaking of the funniness of it, before we go to break, I want to bring up one detail about these movies that I feel like I should bring up because it will come up in the next one. With it being from 2010 to 2012, these movies do rely on one of my favorite tropes in the either post or pre-2010 kids movie era, which is reliance on toilet humor and cringe comedy. My favorite things, my favorite. I will admit that in Rodrick Rules, it has toned down from how the original handled it because, not fully, but it's toned it down considerably, speaking from the perspective of knowing that Rodrick's band is called Loaded Diaper. He runs a punk band called Loaded Diaper, and I'd say that the toilet humor is tamed down, or is at least somewhat more intelligent than them just farting. So it's got that going for it. It's got that going for it over the next movie that we're going to be talking about at the very least, or in some other aspects, which will be Dog Days. so stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Dog Days from 2012, available to watch on Disney+. For the basic plot summary of Dog Days, now that summer has begun, Greg Heffley must now contend with the horrifying prospect of spending time with his dad. Hijinks ensue. So you may have noticed a kind of theme for the movies that I'm talking about tonight, which is that they're all based on Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and also it's like near impossible for me to really give a more detailed summary of the plot, because it's like it's now summer, and he doesn't want to spend time with his dad. Okay, that feels kind of lackluster. Well, do you want me to break down all of the things that happen in this? We've got him going to a country club. We've got him getting a dog. We've got a lot of other things. So it's like, how can I really summarize that all in one, like, sentence or two? Give me a break, please. Anyways, moving on. So I feel like it's interesting to address something here. When it comes to the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, the first two kind of were already covered. We have the first movie that was based on the first book called Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and it largely followed a lot of the same plot points from the book, again in the style and the sense of it just being a series of vignettes, mostly because now that I'm realizing it, it's taken from like a journal of a middle schooler, and he's not really going to be telling a story, he's more going to be like documenting his daily life. So that actually makes sense now that I think about it. So in the defense of the movies, what they had to work with was like the diary of a child, right? So it makes total sense. Anyways, when it came to Dog Days, it's interesting because this is the third movie in the series, but in the series of books, the fourth movie was called Dog Days. Rodrick Rules was still faithful to the series of books and the fact that it was the second book, and so it was the second movie. This was the fourth book, and it's now the third movie. I will admit, however, I'll give it some props, I'll give it a pass. A lot of the plot points, a lot of the details from the third book, called The Last Straw, were taken out and put into Rodrick Rules by association. They knew what they were doing in some capacity, and a lot of the stuff that may not have been in the Last Straw ended up being put into Dog Days. Or to my memory, at least. Or if my memory serves me correctly, which it probably doesn't, because it's been many years since I've read these books. But I think, now that I'm thinking about it, the core detail of Greg having to spend time with his dad, I do believe was the main focus of the third book. And it was kind of then translated into it's now summer and Greg should spend more time outside storyline of the fourth book. So it's interesting. They did something with it. I think part of the reason they did that is because it's almost impossible to just like cram everything from one book into one movie and have something substantial, because then you'll have a lot of kind of just random parts here and there. Because again, it's a journal going nowhere. I'm getting very caught up on this here, but keep in mind, I have severe nostalgia for these books. So when it comes to talking about the movies, it's kind of directly intertwined with talking about the books in some capacity. And anybody I've ever seen review these movies has always said, oh, it's been years since I've read these books. And it's like, yeah, same here, but I remember a lot more of them than you probably are remembering right now reviewing them. So this is vindication in some level. Don't worry about it. Let's move away from the plot for a bit. Let's just set it to the side and talk about some basic details of Dog Days. I think, if I'm being honest, this is the weakest one out of the three. I think the last 30 minutes redeem it in a way, and it's not like the first hour was bad. Keep in mind, this is an hour and a half movie, so when I say the first hour isn't bad, but the last 30 minutes are better, that's kind of an interesting problem to have, not very great. Part of the reason that it's kind of the weakest one is for that first hour, half the jokes don't really hit. one thing I haven't talked about is these books were kind of comedies. They were silly. They had jokes. They were meant to appeal to a younger audience who may not have had the most mature sense of humor. And so the movies tap into that in some capacity. Now, sometimes it works, especially when it comes to Rodrick not being very smart, and when it comes to his band being called Literally Loaded Diaper. That's funny because he doesn't know how to spell it. And to my memory, he spells it like L-U-did dipper. With not even with like two P's, it's D-I-P-E-R. That's funny, even though it's toilet humor. Admit it, that's really funny. I will admit, though, that these movies rely on, again, one of my favorite devices, which is cringe comedy. When I say favorite, I do not like cringe comedy, even remotely. That's my opinion, but I dislike cringe comedy and all it represents because its whole purpose is to get the audience to cringe at a joke and have that be where they start laughing and find it funny. Can you see why I have a problem with that? I don't really enjoy that level of comedy, even remotely. And half the jokes in Dog Days are reliant in some measure on cringe comedy. So you can see why I would say that the first half really isn't all that good, whereas the last 30 minutes kind of redeem itself and not relying on that as heavily. I will also say that weirdly enough, they seem to get better with each movie in terms of the technical aspects. Like they're not oversaturated to like a cartoonish extent. They seem more constructed and know more so what they're doing, and they're playing it safe with the editing, and they have more of a consistent musical theme. And weirdly enough, I feel like sanding off all those rough edges makes it half lose some of its charm and half kind of show that it was a bit funnier when they might not have known what they were doing and were kind of taking more risks with it, if that makes any sense. Because again, the whole point of this is like, why are you taking a children's series of books with 2D drawings that you could have just animated in 2D style when you have like segments of this movie that have the 2D animation style and doing it with live actors? And then you watch the movie and you go, I understand it completely because your casting director is a wizard and was pulling something out of their hat that controlled the fabric of space and time to perfectly cast every single character. And that goes heavily for the main antagonist of this movie. Before we wrap up tonight, I personally appreciate greatly the actor Steve Zahn. He is cast as Greg Heffley's father, that being Frank Heffley. Frank in the books was not super prevalent. He was prevalent in the third book, but he didn't exactly have as much of a character because it was from Craig's perspective. And Greg is selfish and arrogant, and he kind of writes more so about himself. Steve Zahn took what was on the page and brought it to such wonderful life in so many ways. This goes for Rodrick as well, the actor who played him. Let me double check my notes here. Devin Bostick did the exact same thing. The actor playing Greg did the exact same thing. Like, let's check the name here. Hold on a moment. Zachary Gordon did the exact same thing. Greg's best friend Rowley's actor, Robert Capron, did exactly the same thing. Every actor in these movies does exactly the same thing. They bring those characters to life. And having such pure nostalgia for these books means that I am now watching my childhood come to life in the most satisfying of ways. And for that reason, I consider these movies kind of to be the ultimate comfort. Weird nostalgia, some form of memories to them. Not perfect, but worth watching at least once. I won't watch them every year, but it was a fun trip down memory lane. And it was also a very fun trip to have you join me on this week's episode of What to Watch Wednesdays. We're going to wrap it up for tonight. Thank you for listening in to What to Watch Wednesdays here on 88.1 The Burg. I will be back this Saturday from 8 to 10 p.m. for an episode of What to Watch Weekends here on 88.1 The Burg, my Saturday or weekend show, which is a bit longer. Please be sure to tune in to that. Please also be sure to follow along with What to Watch Wednesdays and What to Watch Weekends on both Instagram and YouTube at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces. I will be back next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg, where I'll be telling you all what to watch. Good night, everybody.